They say a child's cry should never be answered with silence. Yet, in one quiet village, a boy was sent away to die in the forest of laughing hyenas. His only crime, being unwanted. That very night, something unseen chose to protect him. And what returned to the village was no longer just a helpless child, but a living reminder of shame. If you're enjoying stories like this, consider subscribing for more African tales of wisdom and justice. In the Red Earth village of Kambali, where the wind carried stories from one compound to another, there lived a woman named Nali. She was known for her quiet strength and her patient eyes that had seen too much loss too early in life. Years before, her husband had been taken by a sudden fever, leaving her alone with a young boy named Jabari. Jabari was not like the other children, or so the villagers often said. He laughed loudly, ran freely, and spoke without the caution that life had forced upon his mother. His name meant brave one, but in the ears of some it sounded like trouble. Still to Nali, he was her heartbeat walking outside her body. For many seasons, it was just the two of them. But loneliness is a slow-burning fire. One Harmattan evening, when the air was dry and the sky dimmed with dust, a man arrived in the village. His name was Kato, a widower like Nali. He carried himself with confidence, his voice deep and convincing, his presence steady like an old tree. The elders welcomed him, and soon he began to visit Nali. Life was not meant to be carried alone, he would say, sitting beneath the baobab tree as the sun dipped low. Nali listened, and in time she believed. Their marriage came quietly without much celebration, but with the approval of the village. Many thought it was a blessing, two broken lives mending into one. But as the elders often say, a new roof may cover old cracks, but it does not erase them. At first, Kato treated Jabari with a distant politeness. He did not smile at the boy, but neither did he speak harshly. He simply watched, and then, slowly, like a shadow stretching at sunset, his irritation began to grow. This boy, Kato muttered one morning as Jabari chased a chicken across the yard, laughing loudly. Why must he always make noise like a drum in a silent shrine? Nali forced a small smile. He is only a child who does not listen, Kato replied sharply. A child who eats like a grown man and works like the wind seen but not felt. The words stung, but Nali said nothing. Days turned into weeks, and the complaints became sharper. He forgets things. He talks too much. He does not respect me. Even the smallest mistake became a reason for anger. If a pot was left unwashed, it was Jabari's fault. If a goat strayed too far, it was Jabari's carelessness. If laughter filled the compound, it became an offense. And each time, Nali stood in silence, her hands clenched, her heart torn between love and fear. One night, as the moon hung low and the village slept, Kato spoke again, but this time, his voice carried a weight that chilled the air. I cannot live like this anymore, he said, staring into the dying fire. This boy will destroy the peace of this home. Nali's breath caught. He is my son, and I am your husband, Kato replied coldly. You must choose what kind of home you want, one with peace or one with noise. The fire cracked softly between them. Silence filled the space where a mother's voice should have risen. In that silence, something fragile began to break, and somewhere in the shadows, destiny was already listening. Morning came with a quiet heaviness, as though even the sun hesitated to rise over Kambali. The compound was unusually still. No laughter, no playful chasing of chickens, no humming from Nali as she swept the yard. Only the faint clinking of a calabash and the restless shifting of goats. Jabari noticed it. Children often feel what adults try to hide. He approached his mother slowly. Mama, did I do something wrong? Nali's hands paused mid-sweep. For a moment, her lips trembled as though the truth fought to escape. But then she turned away. Finish your chores, she said softly, avoiding his eyes. Before Jabari could speak again, Kato stepped out of the hut, his presence, cutting through the morning like a blade. You, he called, pointing at the boy. Today you will take the goats farther than usual." Jabari blinked. "Farther," where Father Kato's voice hardened. "To the Odumare forest." The words fell like thunder. Even the goats seemed to stir uneasily at the name. In Kambali, everyone knew that forest. It was not a place for children. It was not even a place for grown men unless they had no other choice. The elders said the hyenas there did not just hunt, they laughed as they did it. Travelers who passed near it quickened their steps and avoided its shadows. Jabari swallowed hard. "But I am afraid." Kato stepped closer, his eyes cold and unyielding. "Afraid? Does fear feed a household?" "No, but then listen carefully," Kato interrupted. "You will take the goats there, and if you lose even one, do not return." The air grew heavy. Jabari's voice trembled. "If I don't return, where will I go?" Kato shrugged slightly. "Anywhere, just not here." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of exile. Jabari turned to his mother, his eyes wide with silent pleading. "Mama." For a brief moment, their eyes met. And in that moment, a storm of emotions passed between them: love, fear, guilt, helplessness. Nali's lips parted, but no words came. She lowered her gaze, and that silence was louder than any rejection. They say, a mother's silence can wound deeper than a stranger's insult. Jabari felt it. Without another word, he gathered the goats, tying the ropes with small trembling hands. A few children from the village passed by laughing as they headed toward the usual grazing fields. Jabari, one of them, called. "Come with us." He forced a faint smile. "Not today. I have to go, Father." They did not understand. How could they? As he led the goats out of the compound, villagers began to notice. Women paused mid-conversation. Old men under the baobab tree lifted their heads. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. One elderly woman whispered, "They are sending him there." Another shook her head slowly. What kind of home casts out its own child? No one stepped forward. Sometimes the village sees injustice and still remains still. Jabari walked past them all, each step heavier than the last. Behind him, his home grew smaller, the only place he had ever known, fading into distance. He did not look back again, because somewhere deep inside he already knew it was no longer his home. And ahead of him, the Odumare forest waited, silent, patient, and full of things that do not show mercy. The sun climbed slowly, pouring its heat over the wide plains, as Jabari led the goats farther than he had ever gone before. At first, the land still felt familiar. Tall grasses swaying, scattered trees offering shade, and the distant laughter of other children carried by the wind. For a moment, he almost forgot. He let the goats roam, and even joined in a brief game with boys he met along the way. They chased each other between termite mounds, their feet kicking up dust, their laughter rising freely into the sky. But joy, like a shadow at sunset, does not always stay long. As the days stretched on, the air began to change. The laughter faded. The trees grew thicker. The wind no longer sang, it whispered. Jabari noticed the silence first. It was not the peaceful silence of a resting village, but the kind that listens back. He turned slowly. Ahead of him stood the edge of the Odumare forest. The trees there were taller, darker, their branches tangled like fingers hiding secrets. Even the light seemed reluctant to enter. The goats hesitated, bleating softly, their instincts sensing what Jabari could not fully understand. They say the forest remembers everything, the elders would often say, even the footsteps of those who never returned. Jabari swallowed his fear. He stepped forward. At first, nothing happened. The goats grazed cautiously, nibbling at leaves and roots. Jabari tried to keep his mind calm, watching them closely, counting them again and again. 1, 2, 3, all still there. But time does not wait for courage to grow. Slowly, the sun began its descent. The sky turned golden, then orange, then a deep burning red. And with that, the forest awakened. A strange wind moved through the trees, carrying sounds that did not belong to the day, rustling leaves, distant echoes, something like laughter, but not human. Jabari's heart began to pound. Then, without warning, a shadow swept across the ground. He looked up, and his breath caught. Above him circled a creature so large, it seemed to swallow the sky itself. Its wings stretched wide like storm clouds, its eyes sharp and watching. The elders had spoken of it in hushed voices, a great hunting bird said to steal goats, and sometimes children. Before Jabari could react, it dove. Whoosh! Its talons snatched a goat from the ground, lifting it into the air as if it weighed nothing. The remaining goats scattered in panic, their bleats filling the forest. No, no, Jabari shouted, running after them. But the creature was not done. It returned. Again it swooped low, grabbing another goat. Dust and leaves flew into the air. Jabari stumbled, his heart racing faster than his feet could carry him. Go away, he cried, waving his arms, his voice trembling with fear. The creature rose once more, then circled back. This time, it was not aiming for a goat. It was aiming for him. Jabari turned and ran. Branches scratched his skin. Roots threatened to trip him, but fear pushed him forward. Behind him, the beating of wings grew louder, closer, heavier. The ground shook as the creature descended. In a desperate moment, Jabari swerved sharply. Crash! The great bird collided with a thick tree trunk, its massive body slamming into the wood, with a force that echoed through the forest. It staggered, disoriented. Jabari didn't think. He acted. Grabbing his small spear with both hands, he rushed forward and struck the creature at the head, the one place the elders said was both its strongest and weakest point. Once, twice. The creature let out a harsh cry, then fell still. Silence returned. But it was not a comforting silence. Jabari stood there, breathing heavily, his hands shaking. He had survived. But when he turned, his heart sank. The goats were gone, all of them lost in the forest that did not forgive. And now, as the last light faded from the sky, Jabari realized something far more terrifying than the creature he had just faced. Night was coming, and he was completely alone. Darkness did not fall all at once. It crept in slowly, swallowing the last traces of light, as though the forest itself was closing its eyes. Jabari stood frozen for a moment, his chest rising and falling, his ears straining to catch any familiar sound. But there was none. No voices, no laughter, no comforting call of home. Only the forest and whatever lived within it. He looked down at his trembling hands, then at the empty space where the goats had once gathered. They will send me away, he whispered to himself. I cannot go back without them. His voice was small, but his resolve began to grow. They say, when the road disappears, the brave make their own path. Jabari picked up his spear. If the goats were lost, he would find them. Even if it meant walking through the night, he crouched low, examining the ground the way he had seen older herders do. At first, it seemed hopeless. The earth was disturbed, trampled by panic with no clear direction. But then he saw it, a faint patch of dried urine. He knelt closer, touching the ground lightly. It was old, but it was something. Jabari stood, lifted his spear, and threw it forward with all his strength. It landed several steps ahead. He walked to where it fell. Again he searched. This time, he found small, hardened droppings, dry and scattered. They passed here, he murmured. Hope flickered. Again he threw the spear. Step by step, he followed the trail. Each throw carried a silent prayer. Each discovery pulled him deeper into the forest. The signs began to change. Dry traces became slightly moist. Moist traces became fresh. The smell grew stronger. His heart beat faster, not from fear now, but from hope. I'm close, he whispered. Again he threw the spear. This time when he reached it, he froze. Around him stood the goats, all of them. They bleated softly as if they too had been waiting for him. Relief flooded his chest so suddenly that his knees nearly gave way. He ran toward them, touching their backs, counting them over and over. 1, 2, 3, none missing. Tears filled his eyes. "I found you," he breathed. "I found you all." But the night was no friend to celebration. The wind shifted colder now. The forest stirred again. Jabari looked around quickly. "We cannot stay out here," he said, more to himself than to the goats. He gathered them close and began searching for shelter. His eyes scanned the darkness until not far ahead, he saw a large opening in the ground. A cave. Its entrance was wide, its interior hidden in shadow. Jabari hesitated. Something about it felt wrong. But the wind howled softly behind him, and the distant echo of laughter, low, eerie, and unmistakable, reminded him of what roamed this forest at night. "There is no other place," he whispered. Carefully, he guided the goats inside. The air within was warmer. The ground was dry. It felt safe, or at least safer than the forest outside. One by one, the goats settled. Jabari followed, curling up among them, their bodies pressing close their warmth, wrapping around him like a blanket. His eyelids grew heavy. Exhaustion claimed him. But in the darkness of that cave, unseen eyes had once watched, and unseen feet had once walked. For in the wild, every shelter belongs to someone, and Jabari, without knowing it, had just laid down to sleep in the home of something far more dangerous than the forest itself. Night deepened, wrapping the forest in a thick silence that pressed against the ears. Inside the cave, the goats shifted occasionally, their soft breaths rising and falling like a quiet lullaby. Jabari slept among them, his small body finally surrendering to exhaustion. But the forest does not sleep the way humans do. It listens, and it remembers. Among the herd was a large he-goat, broad-chested, with curved horns that caught even the faintest trace of moonlight filtering through the cave's entrance. Unlike the others, he did not lie down fully. His eyes remained open, watchful, as though he sensed a danger the boy could not. They say, when a child is unguarded, the world decides who will stand watch. And that night, it was not a man, it was the goat. Slowly, quietly, the he-goat rose to his feet. He stepped over Jabari's sleeping form and positioned himself at the mouth of the cave, his body forming a barrier between the boy and whatever might enter. The wind outside shifted, then a sound, low at first, then clearer. A laugh, not the laughter of joy, but the dry, cracking laughter of creatures that hunt in the dark, hyenas. Their voices echoed through the forest, rising and falling in eerie rhythm, closer and closer. The goats stirred uneasily. But Jabari did not wake. The first to arrive was the mother hyena. She slipped into the cave with practiced ease, her eyes gleaming in the darkness. Hunger guided her steps, and the scent of goats filled her senses. But as she moved forward, THUD, the he-goat charged. His horns struck her with force, sending her crashing to the ground before she could even cry out. The impact echoed through the cave. Silence followed. Outside, the other hyenas paused. One of them spoke in a low growl. Why has she not returned? Did she find something and keep it for herself? Another chuckled. You know her, always greedy. The largest among them, the father, snorted impatiently. You go. See what delays her. A younger hyena stepped forward and entered the cave. He did not get far. Fed the he-goat struck again. The second body fell beside the first. Outside, the laughter faded into uneasy murmurs. What is happening? Another voice whispered. The father hyena's tone grew sharper. Go, all of you. Do not return without answers. One by one they entered, and one by one they fell. Each time the he-goat stood his ground, his hooves digging into the earth, his breath heavy but unwavering. He did not retreat. He did not hesitate. He fought, not for himself, but for the child sleeping behind him. Finally, when none returned, the father hyena stepped forward. His presence was different, heavier, more cautious. He approached the cave slowly, his ears alert his instincts, warning him of something unseen. He stepped inside. The darkness greeted him. The scent of his fallen kin filled the air. And then the he-goat moved. With a final surge of strength, he charged forward, his horns crashing into the hyena with a force born not of fear, but of protection. The father hyena fell. Silence claimed the cave once more. The night passed. And as the first light of dawn touched the forest, the cave no longer belonged to hunters, but to the one who had stood like a guardian in the dark. Behind him, Jabari stood, unaware that while he slept, someone had chosen to protect him, someone who did not speak, someone who did not abandon, someone who in that moment became more of a father than the man who had sent him away. Dawn crept gently into the forest, its pale light stretching across the ground like a quiet blessing. The cold of the night began to loosen its grip, and the shadows slowly retreated into the corners of the cave. Jabari stirred. At first, he did not remember where he was. His body felt heavy, his limbs stiff from the hard ground. He shifted slightly, feeling the warmth of the goats around him, and for a brief moment he thought he was still dreaming. Then he opened his eyes, and the memory returned. The forest, the night, the fear. He sat up quickly, his heart racing. That was when he saw them. At the entrance of the cave, shapes lay scattered across the ground. Dark, still, silent. Jabari froze. Slowly, he crawled forward, his breath caught somewhere between his chest and throat. As the light grew stronger, the shapes became clearer. Hyenas, several of them, lying motionless. His eyes widened in disbelief. "What happened here?" he whispered. Then he turned, and his gaze fell upon the he-goat, standing tall, still, guarding the entrance. Jabari's chest tightened, understanding dawning in his young heart. "You protected us," he said softly. The goat did not move, but its presence spoke louder than words. In that moment, something changed inside Jabari. They say a child may forget a kind word, but he never forgets who stood between him and danger. Jabari stood slowly, placing his hand gently on the goat's back. "Thank you," he whispered. The forest, which had seemed so terrifying the night before, now felt different. No longer a place of certain death, but a place where courage had taken root. He gathered the goats, guiding them carefully out of the cave. This time his steps were steady. His eyes were no longer filled with fear, but with something stronger. When he reached the edge of the forest, the sun had fully risen, and beyond it, the village of Kambali waited. Word spread quickly. "The boy, he has returned. He came back from the forest of hyenas." Impossible, villagers rushed from their compounds, gathering at the entrance as Jabari emerged, leading the goats behind him. For a moment, no one spoke. They simply stared. Then the silence broke. Drums began to sound. Voices rose, not in fear, but in awe. The village elder stepped forward, his staff tapping gently against the earth. His eyes studied Jabari carefully, as though seeing him for the first time. "You walked into a place where even men fear to go," the elder said slowly, "and yet you return with all that was entrusted to you." Jabari lowered his gaze respectfully. "I only did what I had to do," the elder nodded. "That is what courage looks like." Behind the crowd, Nali stood frozen. Tears filled her eyes as she saw her son alive, unharmed, stronger than before. "Jabari," she whispered. But her voice trembled with something deeper than relief, guilt. Kato stood beside her silent, his face tight with discomfort. The pride he once carried now seemed to shrink under the weight of the villagers' stares. The elder turned toward them. "A child is not a burden," he said, his voice firm. "A child is a trust. And those who fail that trust must carry the shame of it." No one spoke, because the truth had already been spoken. Jabari looked at his mother. Their eyes met again. This time, there were no words needed. Because some wounds are not healed by apology, but by the quiet understanding of what was lost and what could never be undone. The drums of Kambali did not stop that day. They echoed through the village, not only to celebrate a boy who had returned from the forest of hyenas, but to remind every ear that courage does not always wear the face of a warrior. Sometimes, it walks in the body of a child who refused to give up. Jabari stood among the elders, his small frame wrapped in quiet dignity. The same boy who had been called noisy, careless, unwanted, was now being spoken of in hushed admiration. They say, the child you reject may become the story you cannot silence. And so it was. The village elder raised his hand, and the murmurs faded. Let this day be remembered, he began, his voice steady like the earth beneath their feet. Not only for what this boy has survived, but for what we have witnessed. He turned slightly his gaze, sweeping across the crowd. A child was sent into danger. Not by strangers, but by those who were meant to protect him. The words hung heavy in the air. Nali lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. Kato shifted uncomfortably beside her, unable to meet the eyes of the people around him. The elder continued. In the darkness of that forest, when fear could have taken his life, something else chose to stand in its place. He gestured toward the goats. Not a man, not a father, but a creature of the wild. A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Even the animals understand what some humans forget, the elder said. To protect the young is not a choice, it is a duty. Jabari's eyes moved gently toward the great he-goat. In his heart he knew, that night, when the world had turned its back on him, something without words had chosen to stand between him and death. That is not easily forgotten. The elder stepped closer to Jabari, placing a hand on his shoulder. You have shown this village what true courage looks like, he said. And more than that, you have shown us what true loyalty feels like. He paused. When you grow, Jabari, build a home where no child fears to belong. Let your children eat before you. Let your voice protect before it commands. Jabari nodded quietly. I will, he said, and he meant it, because pain, when carried with wisdom, becomes something else. It becomes a promise. In the days that followed, Jabari was no longer seen as a burden. He became a symbol, a reminder that strength is not given by birth, but revealed through trials. As for Nali, she carried her lesson in silence. Every time she saw her son, she remembered the moment she chose fear over love. And though Jabari did not speak harshly to her, his kindness became a mirror she could not escape. They say the deepest regret is not in what we lose, but in what we fail to protect. Kato too changed, but not because he chose to. Shame has a way of reshaping a man. And in Kambali, no one forgot. But life, like the river, does not stand still. Seasons passed, Jabari grew. And when he became a man, people noticed something remarkable. He always fed the smallest child first. He listened before he spoke. And no orphan ever left his compound hungry, because he remembered. He remembered the silence. He remembered the forest. And most of all, he remembered the one who stood guard when no one else did. So when people asked him, who taught you to be this kind? Jabari would simply smile and say, not all fathers speak. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more African tales of wisdom, courage, and justice.